Good evening and thank you for being with us. The future of Thunder Bay's Victoriaville Centre will be decided next month when City Council will vote on whether or not to demolish the 40-year-old facility. That's the recommendation from consultants hired to study the mall. The project lead presented his findings to Council last night. Ryan Benazzo has more.
Victoriaville has been losing money ever since it opened 40 years ago as part of what is now largely viewed to be a failed attempt to revitalize downtown Fort William. Last year, the mall cost the city more than $473,000 to operate, and that number is expected to balloon to more than $800,000 annually in 5 years. Victoriaville's roof also needs extensive repairs. That's why Jeff Palmer and his team at Urban Systems is recommending it be demolished and Victoria Avenue reopened to pedestrian and vehicular traffic.
The mall would be deconstructed almost piece by piece. It was a very intricate process, the method that it was constructed in the first place. So many pieces, I imagine, were fabricated by hand to fit into the existing buildings.
It's loosely estimated to cost more than $10 million to demolish the facility and restore Victoria Avenue. That's significantly less than it would cost to repair the roof and retrofit the mall. Administration wants to get a firm grasp on the finances before making a recommendation on where that money will come from, but Realty Services Manager Joel DePuter believes there's government funding available.
It's almost equal thirds to demolish, to construct roads, and to construct public space.
Councillors have requested more information on a number of issues before they make their final decision on October 19th. For example, the impact on collected tax dollars and the social costs of removing the structure.
You certainly have a demographic that is living on the fringes. They're not affluent, and this is an area where they go.
This is a physical solution to part of the problem. It has to go hand in hand with a social solution as part of a comprehensive plan. We need to have that conversation as soon as a decision has been made.
Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Well, the next time Thunder Bay residents go to the polls, there may be fewer city council jobs to hand out at the ballot box. Councillors voted 9-4 last night to study whether a smaller council would be more efficient. The motion was presented by West Fort Councillor Kristen Oliver. She initially asked to study the effects of reducing city council from 13 members, including the mayor, down to 9 councillors. However, ultimately it was decided not to attach a number to the review, as they said, councillors did, that the community should have a say in how many people sit around the table. Although Oliver says she doesn't know if reducing the size of council will save money, as councillors will now be asked to take on more responsibility, she does believe it's the right time to make a change.
Thursday to take a look at the program services review, and this council may make some moves to look at the delivery of services and programs in this community, and there could be some changes that result from that study. So I think if we're seriously considering any reductions, then I think it needs to start at the top, and that's with council.
For you to amend your procedural bylaw?
The city clerk will report back next month with a plan for public consultation and the cost of studying the matter further. The provincial government is implementing what it says is the largest flu shot campaign in Ontario's history as it plans for a second wave of COVID-19. It's part of the government's so-called fall plan to try and slow the spread of the virus. Premier Doug Ford says it's essential Ontario residents get their shots this year to preserve hospital capacity. Saron Fennell has more.
Well, good afternoon.
The tone of Ontario's premier is changing after the province recorded its highest daily increase of new COVID-19 cases since May.
With the number of cases on the rise, it's clear that the next wave, it will come at us harder than the last one.
A more challenging second wave is expected in part because of flu season. In its COVID-19 fall preparedness plan, the province is releasing 6 steps to help stop the spread of the virus. Among them, Ontario will roll out its largest flu immunization campaign, work to quickly identify COVID-19 outbreaks, and recruit more healthcare workers.
The flu shot provides the best defense and has proven to reduce emergency department visits and wait times, helping to preserve hospital capacity for any surges in COVID-19 patients.
The province announcing nearly $70 million towards the flu, and 5.1 million doses of the vaccine have been ordered.
That's 700,000 more than the approximate use last year.
Elliott says last year, 281 people died from the flu in Ontario. There's uncertainty on how this flu season, combined with COVID-19, will impact the healthcare system. Doug Ford pleading with Ontarians to do their part.
What we don't know is how bad it will be, how hard we will get hit, because that's up to all of us.
The first shipment of the flu vaccine should be ready next week, and that will go towards the most vulnerable population, including seniors and long-term care homes. The following week, another shipment is expected to be ready for pharmacies and primary care workers. This is just the first pillar of the plan. We're expected to learn more over the coming days. Saran Fennell, CTV News.
Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu says with Ontario hitting a new 3-month high for COVID cases, it is evident there is a resurgence. But she is not calling it a second wave just yet. Meanwhile, the local MP says she is frustrated about the long wait times for COVID testing in Thunder Bay and says work is being done to address the problem. Corey Nordstrom reports.
The latest COVID numbers for Ontario are an obvious concern to Canadian Health Minister Patty Hajdu, but she won't go as far as to label it a second wave.
We could call it a second wave. You could call it, a spike. There are a number of different ways to define what it is, but essentially what we are seeing is a rapid growth in cases.
Hajdu is having regular dialogue with provincial health officials to keep an eye on hotspots like Toronto, Ottawa, and the Peel region, but knows this has an impact on all Ontarians.
Of course, what we want to make sure is that we don't lose control of the spread of coronavirus, because soon after you do that, you can start to see a growth in hospitalizations and, of course, deaths, and that's what we're all working so hard to prevent.
And Hajdu is frustrated to hear of delays in testing for regions like Thunder Bay, where it can take 8 to 10 days to get tested if you don't have symptoms of COVID-19, and another 2 to 5 days to receive results.
The province of Ontario has had since May, where they have known that the federal government would pay for testing expansion, for contact tracing, and for data. Why those 3 buckets? Because they're so important to keeping the growth down. Getting a test when you need it, when public health has recommended that you get one, and getting that test rapidly is actually critical to curtailing the growth of coronavirus.
Hajdu notes the regional hospital is in talks with the province on additional sites or other approaches to solve the issue. And Ontario Health Minister Christine Elliott recently announced that COVID testing at pharmacies will soon be available. To that, Hajdu says the more testing options people have, the better.
Anything that we can do to work in partnership with other healthcare professionals like pharmacists and like pharmacies is probably going to add positive value to access to testing. And so the idea that someone could rapidly access a test in a pharmacy, I think is a great way to sort of think about expanding the boundaries of testing.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Thunder Bay's Shelter House was planning to host their annual memorial event today to commemorate the lives of homeless individuals that have been lost over the past year. But due to the recent change to gathering sizes in Ontario, it may not happen at all this year. Last year's event, organized with Hospice Northwest, saw more than 100 people come out to pay their respects. This year's gathering was supposed to take place in the spring, but was pushed back to September due to the pandemic. Shelter House Executive Director Michelle Jordan says they had plans to close off George Street to allow for social distancing, but the new outdoor gathering limit of 25 people meant it just wasn't possible.
Sometimes our folks are not, don't feel comfortable attending memorial services and that sort of thing. So we do our own, we do it almost every year, whether we have hospice involved or not. We try to do some type of memorial service.
Jordan hopes to reschedule to a later date in 2020. If not, the memorial event will have to be pushed back to next spring or canceled altogether. Thunder Bay Police continue to investigate a pair of car pedestrian collisions that have sent 2 victims to hospital. The first occurred last evening around 7 at the intersection of Grenville Avenue and Marion Street, where a 70-year-old man was struck by a pickup truck. The man's injuries are said to be serious. The driver of the pickup did remain at the scene until police arrived. Then, this morning around 8:30, a 15-year-old was struck in the Walsh and Selkirk Street area by a vehicle driven by a 49-year-old woman. The teen was transported to hospital with what are described as non-life-threatening injuries. Police say charges are pending. The Thunder Bay Public Library is giving back $250,000 to the city. That's the amount the library has saved in operating costs during the COVID-19 shutdown. The library is still working through the stages of its reopening plan. Customers are not yet allowed inside, but they can pick up and return books at any of their 4 locations. Virtual programming is also available. CEO John Pateman says since taxpayers fund nearly all of the library's annual operating budget, it's only fair the money be returned to the city.
Obviously, because of the whole COVID situation, it's not been a normal year for Thunder Bay Public Library. We're in a happy situation where we've got a surplus, and we felt that given the city funds us 96% of our funding, it would be a good idea to give that money back to help the city's challenging financial situation.
Pateman says he hopes that money will help to fund shelters and emergency services, which he believes are needed now more than ever. Pateman expects the library will move on to the next phase of its reopening plan soon, allowing limited services inside all 4 locations. And an adventurous man from Wisconsin has come up with an inventive way to get together with his friends from Thunder Bay during the pandemic. The Canada-U.S. border closure was recently extended until October 21st. So Cody Esser has been organizing face-to-face visits with his Canadian buddies along the banks of the Pigeon River. Jonathan Wilson has the story.
The border's closed, but we can hang out right here.
Cody Esser drove 8 hours from his home near Madison, Wisconsin this past weekend to see his Thunder Bay friends and chat across the Pigeon River. Esser met them all on one of his random trips to this area, which he writes about on his popular travel blog called The Impulsive Traveler Guy.
I'm very impulsive. Actually, the first trip I blogged about was how I hopped the Canadian border without a passport.
Esser says this time he checked with border officials on both the Canadian and U.S. sides to make sure this is legal. And he says they actually gave him advice on the best spots to do it.
Cody certainly has lots of crazy ideas, but I think this one's great. I mean, it's definitely one of the more out there ones he's done, but it's certainly worked out and it's brought some people together that, you know, we never probably would have met without Cody, to be honest. So it's great.
Cody, cheers! Cheers! Cheers!
I think this is very, very fun. A very nice thing, very positive thing to do on an afternoon. And it's surprising how close Cody is and how I don't even have to scream and yell at him. He's basically right over there.
What do you miss about Thunder Bay? Probably everything between the Persians, between, you know, what else? Poutine.
Yeah.
You know, all that stuff, just hanging out and having a good time. It's beautiful scenery, you know, the Canadian experience, everything.
The cross-border buddies chatted about things like the differences in COVID rules in Canada and the U.S. and reminisced about their good times together, including meeting up at the Blues Festival a few years ago.
At Blues Fest, yeah, that place is too big. We're not going to run into each other. I'm like, we'll run into each other. What do we do? I remember that very clear. And you guys did.
On this day, dozens of Americans could be seen hiking along the riverbanks at Grand Portage State Park, just down from High Falls. For the Thunder Bay friends, it's around a 1-kilometer hike from the Ontario Visitor Centre to the scenic spot within the boundaries of Pigeon River Provincial Park. Trush and Peaver both say it's a lot more fun chatting with their friend in person rather than on Zoom or Skype.
It's more surreal, and the fact that he's in the U.S. and I'm in Canada when we're so near each other. So I'd say this is cooler.
It's nice to be able to go and talk to people that you normally can't see because they're right there behind you. And, you know, you miss that interaction all summer, you know, no trips down south or anything. So I think it's awesome to come here and be able to talk to them.
Here's to hopefully 2021 being great. Yeah.
Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
Yeah, it's all about for all of us staying connected.